up until this point, there's still a personal will left. And as long as there's a personal will left, one can continue to dissolve perceptual filters in the personal spectrum. The 10 Oxherding pictures. Picture number 8, or woodblock number 8. This is the culmination of practice, the culmination of awakening, the culmination of the individual spiritual journey. It is also a kind of finality in the personal spectrum, let's say. I'll go more into this. To me, this represents no self-realization. There are other interpretations of these woodblocks, but this is just some way of pointing. This is a way that I can utilize this really poetic and powerful liturgy to point directly, which is what I'm always doing anyway. But I think they're very eloquent, and there's so much power in some of these very simple statements. So I'll start by reading the 10th Oxherding picture. Excuse me, the 8th Oxherding picture. We'll get to the 10th. So number 8 is called Both Self and Bull Transcended. And the woodblock shows this empty circle. You could say it's like the Enzo, or just an empty circle with nothing in it. And the phrase is, whip, rope, person, and bull all merge in no thing. This heaven is so vast, no message can stain it. How may a snowflake exist in a raging fire? Here are the footprints of the patriarchs. Comment: mediocrity is gone. Mind is clear of limitation. I seek no state of enlightenment, neither do I remain where no enlightenment exists. Since I linger in neither condition, eyes cannot see me. If hundreds of birds strew my path with flowers, such praise would be meaningless. So beautiful. So as I have mentioned in other videos and retreats and conferences and so forth, there is this sort of finality, at least in one very important aspect of this path. People ask, does the path end? Where does it end? What is it like when it ends? Is there anything to do after it ends, and so forth? And like so many pointings, teachings, points of discussion in deeper realization, it is paradoxical. This is very paradoxical. But I will break it down in simple terms for this video. And that is that the individual that's on the path, the seeming individual, the seeming separate one, separate self, the one who is suffering the experience of life, the one who makes spirituality an important part of their life, and sort of adds that to their life, and then directs their attention toward it and builds that part of their life, and even has a sort of relationship with that part of their life, their spiritual life, their awakening life. That one goes away, or that one is seen to be an illusion. So it's rather difficult to talk in terms of what that is like, because it's the one that it's like this or like that for is what has been seen through, right? So the language is very paradoxical here as well. But I want to make one point that is kind of the central paradox in this setting, and that is that when let's call it just the energetic signature of the self, or when the most fundamental aspects of the illusion of self, when that drops out, it doesn't mean that you negate the conventional self. It's not like you walk around with telling people not to call you a name because you're no one. It doesn't mean you speak in these really extreme spiritual terms like there's no one to do anything, there's no one to practice. You may speak like that as a pointer. That can be a powerful pointer at times, but you certainly don't believe that. There's nothing about belief that points to this deep realization. because it's shining forth so brightly and so powerfully that beliefs are like, completely absurd. So the paradox here again is that there's no reason to stop using the word I. There's no reason to use anything you believe about spirituality and what you believe about no self to, justify bad behavior or to talk yourself into or out of anything. It's not a concept. It's not a conceptual framework. No self-realization is not a conceptual framework. It's not a framework. It's not even a stage. It is fruition. It is the realization of what's always been the case, always been right here, so to speak, what's been right in front of your face. So with that, you're actually more free to inhabit the relative self in a sense. This part particularly can be slippery because what often gets heard when I speak like that is that you don't really need the realization of no self. You can just be the best person you can be or something like that. And you can do whatever you want. But when we talk about realization, you don't want to overlook these very important and very fundamental insights. And the sort of final insight for the self, for the practitioner, is the realization of no self. It is an end. It definitely comes to an end. Something comes to an end here. Now, that doesn't mean that, to use the term loosely, that doesn't mean that the spiritual life ends. In fact, it's seen that it's not part of life. It's not part of your life. It never has been. Spirituality isn't part of life. Awakening and enlightenment aren't parts of life. They're not like something you can use to prop yourself up or to get what you want, or it's just not like that. And that can be very confusing to some people early on, actually. It is simply clear seeing of the fundamental misperception that's just no longer here. So that's my introduction. Now, I do want to point out a few pointers that come through so nicely in this woodblock. So whip, rope, person, and bull all merge in no thing. It doesn't say nothing. It's actually a hyphenated word, no thing. That's critical. It's very important because that's actually, to me, that's demonstrating that non-dual realization, which was the seventh Oxherding picture, or my interpretation of it. What this is pointing out is that it's absolutely critical for the non-dual aspect, the non-dual realization to be clear. It can fluctuate, you can get tastes of it and so forth, but it's critical that it's realized to even get close to the realization of no self. Because otherwise it's just too slippery. It's too subtle. It's too easy to overlook. So this no thing is very much how the non-dual, let's call it an experience, is. It's not that there's nothingness. It's not that there's some vast space called awareness and nothing in it or something. It's not that. It's just not. It's when there are no things, there are no objects. It's also clear there's no subject. And those come together really ultimately. That no subject, no object. Suddenly, the clarity is primary, and the clarity arises from non-segmented experience, non-divided experience, undivided experience. That is the clarity, and it's rather beautiful. It's rather poignant. It's infinitely interesting, endlessly interesting to just experience the non-dual aspect of reality. Then it's not an aspect. It's the sort of nature of it. It's the nature of experience itself. It's the nature of the appearance of form, even. Yeah. So that's critical. And once that's there, and once that's not there, let me say it differently. Once that's that insight has dawned and it's clear and stable, then it gets much easier to ferret out what remains. And what remains is what's been causing all the problem. What remains is what's been causing the suffering. The fundamental illusion of being able to separate out in any way at all, or even the impression, the mental impression that it could happen, to subjectify, right? Subjectification, the experience of an inner world, the experience of the place that you think you retreat to regroup. Now understand, before any awakening, you don't just retreat to that, you live in it. right? You live in that inner world, and it's very uncomfortable when you're identified with it, right? And it's very small space. It's very confining. But what we're engaging now in deeper realization after non-dual realization, what we're engaging is that the fundamental ability to filter experience in such a way that it can create dualistic experiences and then create, a mental world and on and on. And then that becomes very complex. So we're looking at the mechanism that even made that possible in the first place. That's what we're looking at when we talk about no self. So again, that first sentence is nice. It's kind of pointing to the fact that this is in the landscape of non-duality, that this can be clarified. So it says, this heaven is so vast, no message can stain it. Again, pointing to the ineffability of all this. And it's also heaven, right? It's the sky. This vastness is so beautiful and so empty. Where's a message going to stick? Where's a concept or construct or paradigm or view? Where's that going to form in the sky, right? Where's that going to form in this vast ocean of emptiness? Yeah. So no message can stain it, meaning, again, the reminder, this is not conceptual. This isn't about doctrine. This isn't about, it's something that actually dawns. It just clarifies, and it's just obvious. Doesn't matter if you have any understanding of, say, Buddhism or Advaita Vedanta. If this realization dawns, if the realization of non-duality dawns for you, it will be crystal clear, regardless of whether or not you have any words to use to describe it, or whether you have any doctrinal references for it. Doesn't matter. It's just that clear. And the raging fire, right? What is the raging fire? The raging fire is the raging fire of presence. Presence becomes very, very poignant as these perceptual filters drop. Call it mindfulness on steroids, to where you can't not be mindful in a way. Like there's just a full-on experience of empty clarity, empty radiance, right? The last sentence says, here are the footprints of the patriarchs. I would say the matriarchs and patriarchs for sure. It's just that the patriarchs did most of the writing and public teaching and whatever, but there certainly have been many, many, many women also who have woken up to this insight, and many that are alive today and that I know personally. So here are the footprints of the ancestors, let's say. Footprints of the ancestors, meaning like this is where the insight into the you can almost say the purpose of this whole thing. What was the purpose of awakening in the first place? To end the personal suffering? Sure, that's what it was for you, the person, but also it played a trick on itself because it ended the person that was suffering, right? But still, what's the point beyond that, right? Well, the point is, this is the footprints of the ancestors. The footprints of the ancestors are the Dharma vehicle. Yeah, and now you are part of that Dharma vehicle, whether you like it or not. You won't take pride in that, as the next part explains, but it becomes obvious that there is really only one reason for this life right now, at this level of clarity, and that is to free other sentient beings from their own suffering if they're interested in that. And you could also say to ease the suffering in other ways, but that's the primary way. So this is the footprints of the ancestors. This is the end of the personal journey, the end of the self-centered journey, and the beginning of prajna wisdom, the altruistic unbinding that may or may not overtly turn into some kind of teaching behavior and activity, but the transmission will be there all the time. Yeah. Okay. And then comment says, mediocrity is gone. Love this. Mediocrity is gone. There's a quality to living in the world of mind identified thought that is kind of a very narrow bandwidth of experience, although it may not seem like it when you're in it. But it's a very narrow bandwidth of experience. And when that maybe is the mediocrity here. This is what I'm going to interpret it as at this moment, at least. And that's gone. And then there's this very dynamic, infinite, really, stage of experience. This potential for experiencing, for appearance to come and go, appear and disappear, and so forth. It's quite something, but it's not mediocre. It's not numbness. It's not holding ourself into a narrow bandwidth of identity. All that's gone now. The next statement says, mind is clear of limitations. This is beautiful. Mind with a capital M, right? Again, all this is pointing to the non-dual clarity. And then, I seek no state of enlightenment, neither do I remain where no enlightenment exists. Yeah, this is really what leads us into the 9th and 10th Oxherding picture, this statement here. Very important. It can take some time, even after no self-realization. With no self-realization, there will be this massive reverence for this, even though you may not say that. You'll feel it. But the maturing of that, the maturing of the no self-realization, and it does mature in a way, the relative interface with it will mature. And as that matures, you realize this, that trying to linger in the enlightened condition, the truly enlightened condition, trying to linger there is a fixation. So now we're getting into the mechanics of suffering. We're getting into the roots of suffering, what causes suffering to be possible at all. Now, even if you are, and this is all at this point karmic, I think. This is very much conditions based, but if you are able to remain in that space of enlightenment, now again, ineffable, right? I can't talk about this, but I'll say it this way, right? There's no you in that space, but to be able to remain there and that to be your primary experience, unperturbed, is wonderful and good for you if you can. And then it's realized that the only place to go now is back into the suffering, right? The fifth, Tozan's fifth rank says, most people want to leave the stream of phenomena, leave the stream of suffering, let's say. But I come back to sit in the ashes. What else is there to do, right? Again, this is the 10th Oxherding picture, and we'll talk about that. But since I linger in either condition, eyes cannot see me. I seek no state of enlightenment, neither do I remain where no enlightenment exists. So that means that there's a kind of seamlessness that begins to formulate between the relative and absolute aspect, and also the clear, direct knowledge of what enlightenment actually is. The clear and direct knowledge of no self will become seamless with selves. Will become seamless with anyone you encounter that feels like a self to them. It may not feel like a self to you, but there's also no need to point that out. And that's key. That's the key of this sort of stage of maturity, I would say, is that you can enter the relative very easily. You can enter even what could be called suffering very easily. And there's only one reason for that. It's to meet others in their suffering. You won't be patting yourself on the back for this. You may not even be aware it's happening. You will at some level. But what is there left to do, right? This is the archetype of the bodhisattva. What more is there to do? Just sit there in bliss? No. Bodhisattva stays around until everyone else has entered nirvana, right? Until all suffering is ended. That's the commitment of the bodhisattva. That's the vow of the bodhisattva. And that's the heart of the bodhisattva, right? And how that works is this. I seek no state of enlightenment, neither do I remain where no enlightenment exists. Since I linger in neither condition, eyes cannot see me. This is a funny part of this too, is there's this goes back to ordinariness. There's an ordinariness to all this. And if someone really comes across as powerfully enlightened, that's one thing. But if someone comes across as ordinary, and yet they somehow the interaction with them is freeing you, that's a maturing toward along the lines of the bodhisattva archetype. Yeah. Because they can meet you where you are seamlessly without any spiritual agenda at all. You know, that's where things get much more nuanced, and it adds a degree of freedom for the practitioner, for the not the person who's suffering, but the one who's moved beyond this fundamental illusion of self. There's a an added degree of freedom to be able to go right back into the suffering, to move through it, to explore all parts of it with incredible detail. That's an honor for the bodhisattva, right? What else is there to do? What else is there left to do? And that's an exploration into the quote unquote personal, as well as it is an exploration with another suffering being, and however that transmission is taking place. Because even when the self-structure drops, in fact, most importantly, after the self-structure drops, it doesn't mean that all personal fixations are gone, or that repressed emotions are never discovered, or that cycles and behavior patterns that are self-centered suddenly end. That's not true. What happens is they come into consciousness, very obviously. What happens is you can't avoid seeing them anymore at all, and they will be worked through, and they're worked through much more quickly, but one has to be willing to do that. And that's how you start to really realize, you start to live this statement, I seek no state of enlightenment, neither do I remain where no enlightenment exists. Because you have to know how to be unenlightened, right? Because you may be called on to be unenlightened in a moment. Play the role of the unenlightened, very important. Okay, it's all very paradoxical. But think about it this way. If you inhabit the absolute, if you inhabit enlightenment and non-dual clarity, that's wonderful. But if there's still suffering that you haven't realized you can also now inhabit once again, then that limitlessness is limited. But I seek no state of enlightenment, neither do I remain where no enlightenment exists. That's unlimited. Yeah, no limitations there. And the last statement says, if hundreds of birds strew my path with flowers, such praise would be meaningless. Yeah. You don't get to pat yourself on the back for being enlightened. It's not like that at all. You don't pat yourself on the back for being a spiritual teacher. There's no benefit to you. There's actually no benefit to anyone, which is funny, but there's definitely a benefit to the suffering one. So, yeah, all gets paradoxical. But I hope everyone experiences this at least once in their life, to really experientially get what this means. Whip, rope, person, and bull all merge in no thing. I think my teacher said at one time that Aiken Roshi, maybe he was quoting somebody, he was quoting a Zen master as saying that this is, this was Tangen Harada Roshi, who said that if there's a goal of Zen in his eyes, it is that everyone experiences this eighth Oxherding picture. I don't know if he said experience or not, but I would say realizes. That's it, right? Because beyond that, everything's going to be completely conditions based, for sure. But up until this point, there's still a personal will left, and as long as there's a personal will left, one can continue to dissolve perceptual filters in the personal spectrum. Okay, 2 more to go.